Hello and welcome back to the last quarterback evaluation episode of the 2025 draft cycle. I'm here today to talk about Cam Miller, quarterback out of North Dakota State, a guy that probably very few people have heard of coming out in this draft. Did come from a North Dakota State program that at the FCS level has a ton of success year in and year out. I think they won their 10th national championship this year, so comes from a program with a lot of success. Same program that Carson Wentz came out of, that Trey Lance came out of. So a program that has produced NFL caliber talent before, even if those guys didn't necessarily live up to expectations that were set for them coming out of college. Miller is a guy that had a lot of success at North Dakota State that culminated in a win against Montana State in the national championship game for the FCS. They have had so much success there with Miller starting at quarterback. He's played 4 years at North Dakota State and won multiple national championships while he was there. This is a guy that I think fit very well for what North Dakota State was trying to do, because for their level of competition, he's a very good athlete, but is a fairly talented passer as well. So especially at the FCS level, you see him able to have a lot of success with those. It's actually funny, the team that they played in the national championship, the FCS national championship game was North Dakota State versus Montana State. Both of the quarterbacks for those teams were actually drafted by the Raiders in the 6th round within 3 picks of each other. The Raiders took both of them. Now, the other quarterback, the Montana State quarterback, is a dynamic athlete and was selected to be more of kind of like an athlete, maybe wide receiver, kick returner kind of guy. It seems like Miller, they are actually expecting to be a guy that they hope to stick at quarterback. So he is the last guy that we will cover for these episodes. Let's start out with some of the more positive things for Miller. Miller does grab your attention when you first watch him and you say, okay, this guy might have enough traits to have some success in the NFL. You see him operate well in the quick game, and he gets the ball out quick. In that, he delivers the ball with some different arm angles. He throws with good zip, and he's a very instinctive player. I think you can tell that he spent a lot of time in one offense because he understands how to manipulate defenders pretty well for a guy at his level. I think he is able to look guys off and understand what throwing windows are going to come available. You can tell that he is in great command of the offense that he is operating in. This is a guy that's very comfortable. And because of that, you see him attempt a lot of aggressive throws over the middle of the field, which is a big plus for him because those are certainly, I think, the type of throws that will allow him to potentially translate to the NFL level. There's a lot of guys in this class that don't handle that as well. So that's something I see in his game that I think could end up being an NFL skill for him because his arm, while it's fine in the quick game, things like that, he's not a great thrower down the field. He does not have great arm strength, and you see that pop up the most on throws where he is targeting the perimeter. So like there's some out routes where the ball just doesn't have enough velocity on it or strength to get there in the way that you would hope it would. Sometimes they're underthrown. Sometimes the ball is just too slow, right? So the defender has a much better chance of breaking it up. Certainly not a plus arm. More points for the flexibility for that type of arm strength, but he's not a guy that just has a lot of raw power. And the other way that you see that is he is not able to throw flat-footed, right? If he's not able to have a strong base, his arm is not strong enough to make up for that. And so especially on deep balls, if he does not have the ability to really set his feet and throw the way he wants to throw, it becomes a lot more difficult for him. Like I said before, Miller is a solid athlete, and North Dakota State took big advantage of that. They used him a lot in their run game, both as a threat, but also they gave him real opportunities to carry the football. They had design runs for him, he actually carried the ball between the tackles a good bit, and then they, use him on sweeps and read options and things like that as well. Like a pretty versatile runner in that regard. I would describe his running as more plus change of direction and creative than a guy that is going to just turn on the burners and beat you. I don't think he is like a great speed guy. So in the NFL, I think you're looking at a guy that will probably like escape the pocket pretty well, but is not going to be like a dynamic part of a run game. I think his like overall top end speed is pretty solid, but he's certainly not a guy that's going to like break away for a super big gain. And you just see a lot of times where defenders are, while he may create a few extra yards, he's not, breaking the play for 20 or 30. And especially in the FCS, like you're going to have a hard time getting better at that as you get to the NFL. But overall, I do think his escapability is a plus for him. And he's a guy that's 6'1", 210. So solid size, not great, but especially, those smaller type of players, like it's very helpful to have that creativity in your game, because sometimes the pocket's just going to get muddy for you and you're not going to be able to stick it out in the same way that a larger player would likely be able to do. He's not a very physical runner. He can take some contact, but you don't see him run through players very often, even though he sometimes is willing to try. This is not a guy that's going to break a lot of tackles as a runner. You see sometimes where he's over-reliant on scrambling, which at that level, it works out fine because he's a pretty good athlete. In the NFL, I think if he leans too far towards that, he will start to struggle and start to take a lot of sacks. So I think that's something he will need to iron out with his game. And lastly, in terms of the big concerns that I have for him, he's just not a very precise thrower. I think you see this in some of his throws that are more intermediate, middle of the field throws, where you start to see the ball placement get worse. But especially on some of the deeper throws, there are some really bad misses, just throws that are hard to explain, and demonstrate that, this is not a top tier arm that we're looking at here. This is a guy that has some inconsistencies and does not have elite arm strength. But there's enough there where, there's some things to get excited about on his tape, even if it's not as consistent or as explosive as some of the top guys in this class. So overall, Miller is, I think, an interesting prospect. There's definitely things you see that he does well enough to be like an NFL caliber player. I think it's a question of, can he start to put those things together on a more regular basis? And obviously, anybody coming from that level, it's going to be a big jump, right? The athleticism difference from the competition he was playing week in and week out compared to the guys he's going to see in the NFL, like that's going to be a big jump. North Dakota State actually played Colorado this year and played them pretty competitively. Miller had a pretty solid game. We're going to look at a few clips from that game here in just a minute. And that is something that's encouraging, right? Colorado's defense not great this past year, but had some guys that are pretty good athletes. So let's go ahead and look at some clips from that game, and then we'll finish off with his grade and some comps for Cam Miller. All right, first clip here, I think does a good job of showing his instinctive ability as a player and his comfortability within the offense. So here, North Dakota State's running play action. The goal here is, sink these linebackers down. Obviously, you can see this has worked, right? This is not the position you really want to be in at this point if you're this linebacker. At this point, he's got to drop all the way back. He's lost at this point, right? He's got no idea where this receiver is because he's pulled so far in because of the run. Miller immediately hits his back foot, identifies this, throws. You could argue maybe this isn't a super accurate throw. I would at least suggest that, the middle of the field player, he's got an understanding that he doesn't want to run him straight into that. So I actually think this is a solid throw, even if it does pull him back maybe a little further than you would hope for. Overall, good rep from Miller here. Just understands exactly what he is seeing. And this is stuff you see consistently with him. When the answers are presented to him, he takes them well. And I think he has very good feel in that regard. All right, next play. You're going to see some escapability here from Miller. So what he wants is not there. He's able to pump fake, escape out the back of the pocket, and create a throwing window make that throw. Obviously, an easy throw at this point, but you see the escapability with him is a big plus in his game, and he's able to use it, right? He's quick. He identifies here, okay, I need to escape out the back. I can't just run straight to my right and makes that play. So you do see some creativity with him, and like I said, he has the speed and the agility to make these type of plays, and a lot of times, he can turn it into a positive gain for the North Dakota State offense. All right, here's a more negative play from this game, and this speaks to the deep ball inconsistency. It's probably going to be even hard to see the ball here. At this point, the ball is like pretty much off the screen and has now flown deep into the sideline, right? Miller just, sometimes you just see these really bad misses on his tape, especially down the field. So again, I'll let this one run through. You see the ball there land over on the sideline, just doesn't really give his guy any chance to make a play. And there's just some times where you see that and, it's start to question, okay, can I really depend on this guy to be accurate down the field, right? Is that something that's going to be a consistent part of his game, or is this guy going to have to play point guard for my offense rather than, generating explosive plays? And that's where you start to see, okay, the upside's probably not super high, right? At first, when you see his athleticism, you see some of the feel for the scheme, you start to think, oh, I wonder if this guy's upside is actually, relatively high, and that's what holds me back from ultimately reaching that conclusion. Okay, another clip here where you're just going to see his ability to anticipate throws over the middle of the field. So again, he understands we've got two high safeties here, middle of the field's going to be open. And this linebacker has been pulled across the field by the tight end, immediately identifies the throw that needs to be made here. Again, puts it in a good spot where his guy's not getting killed right after taking the hit. Just another good rep from Miller, and you see this a lot on tape. The ability for him to be on time, immediately see what the defense is giving him, is just very valuable. You see there, threads the needle. Overall, just a very good rep. All right. Last one here, again, you're going to see some more bad accuracy. They're going to run a little pick route here, throws out to the flat. Just a miss, right? Not really much to say there. The accuracy just isn't what you hope it would be sometimes. And I think that's something that, maybe can improve as he continues to play in the NFL, but it's certainly something that you have to be a little bit worried about as he enters the league. So there's some clips with Miller, again, kind of show some of his skills, some of his weaknesses. Overall, I enjoyed watching Miller's tape. I think he's a guy that does not limit your offense, especially at the collegiate level. Like, you can ask him to do a lot of different things, and he can handle most of them. And overall, he was a very good player for a North Dakota State team that obviously, not as good as many FBS teams, but was very successful at that level. Had an offensive lineman that ended up going first round of the Seahawks, right? Like, there's legit talent down at this level for at least the top teams, and he stood out for North Dakota State this past year. All right, in terms of comps, this is a comp that a lot of times I feel like people throw out for a lot of guys that I don't think it applies to. But when I watched Cam Miller, the absolute best case comp that I could come up for with him was Brock Purdy. The reason for that is they're both a little bit undersized. They both win over the middle of the field and more in the short to intermediate. You don't see Purdy hitting a ton of bomb deep shots, but he wins a lot in that 10 to 20 yard area because of the throws that Shanahan is able to create for him. I think Miller has very similar traits. He has a similar level of mobility. I think where Purdy obviously is much better than Miller at this point is the arm strength. I think is stronger for Purdy, and I think he is a much more accurate quarterback at this point. But in terms of like the physical tools, the style of play, I think Miller is a guy that probably could handle a little more in the design run game at the NFL level. I think he's a slightly faster player than Purdy, but I think they do very similar things. And if Miller is able to piece together the accuracy a little bit better, if he's able to become a more precise thrower and hang in the pocket a little bit better, and continue to work on developing arm strength, I think that is what the upside for him would look like. What I think is more likely for him is he's somebody like Taylor Heinicke, a guy that you enjoy watching as a backup quarterback. If he plays well for a couple games, you might start talking yourself into him because he does create things out of structure, and is not completely reliant on the offense providing him everything. And I enjoy those type of backups, right? Because at least they might win you a game, even if sometimes it may look ugly if the accuracy is not there. I much prefer those guys to, the boring statue, like just robot guys. So I do think Miller is an interesting player. I'm not surprised at all that he got drafted after watching him. And my grade for him is a 6th round grade. I think he was pretty much properly valued by the Raiders. I think this makes sense as a guy to invest in as a backup that probably does have a very small amount of long-term starter upside, which is why I did slot him above Dylan Gabriel. Like I had them both as 6th round guys. I slotted Cam Miller just slightly higher because I do think Miller shows a little bit more upside with the athleticism, where if he's able to harness some of those skills, he probably looks a little bit better than if Gabriel goes well in the NFL. So yeah, Miller's an interesting player. I think for a team like the Raiders, where you're at this point, you've got your starter for the next 3-ish years now in Geno, and you're just looking more long-term. This makes a lot of sense as a guy to bring in and potentially develop, because you do have a guy that's a solid backup in Aiden O'Connell, but is probably not going to be the answer anytime soon. So might as well take a shot, see if you can develop a guy, and maybe there's some upside there down the road. So that is the Cam Miller eval. Like I said, I have a 6th round grade on Miller. I think he's interesting. Like I would not write this guy off from having some success in the NFL, but I do think it's more of that kind of like chaos backup type than it is a guy with super high upside, or a guy that I believe will for sure be a starting level quarterback. So that is the last quarterback eval. John and I are going to have a couple more episodes coming out soon for a first round recap, or really just general draft recap overall. And then, like I just did for Miller, we're going to talk about the landing spots for all the quarterbacks we discussed. Obviously, that makes a huge difference in the amount of success these guys are going to have in the league. The eval is only one part of it, right? The team fit, all those things are super important, especially for these late round guys where opportunity is going to look very different. We're going to discuss that in more detail on a show coming up soon. So stay tuned for those. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you soon.